Today's story is about a cruel and dangerous serial killer who made the people of Miramichi, a city in Canada, tremble with fear. Because of this killer, people were so terrified that they didn't even dare to step outside their homes at night. He murdered people in the most brutal ways possible. Eventually, he was caught and sent to prison. But even the prison couldn't hold him. He managed to escape with great cunning. Most prisoners after escaping run to places where no one can find them. But this killer returned to Miramichi, and what happened after that is something the people there can never forget. This story takes place in Miramichi, a peaceful city in Canada, where people lived without fear and supported each other. Crime was almost non-existent there, and the crime rate was very low. The place was considered so safe that people didn't even lock their doors at night. But in 1989 something happened that changed this city forever. From then on, the people of Miramichi lived in constant fear of a man they couldn't even see, because he could strike anyone anywhere at any time. The locals called him the devil, because he killed people with extreme cruelty. Out of fear, almost everyone in town bought a gun, and now they would lock their doors and windows before sleeping. For almost 7 months, this serial killer continued murdering people. The police said that after every killing he would vanish into the forests before sunrise. It was as if they were trying to catch a ghost. But this ghost had a name: Alan Joseph Legere. Before becoming one of Canada's most wanted criminals, Alan was just a normal child. But his life was far from normal. His childhood was filled with poverty, abuse, and silence. People often say that devils are born, not made. But in Alan's case, it was his circumstances that turned him into one. Alan was born in 1948 in a small town called Brunswick, near the Miramichi River. It was a tiny place with very few jobs, so most people there lived in poverty and struggled to survive. Alan's family was one of them. His mother, Louise, was raising 4 children alone because Alan's father had abandoned them. To make ends meet, his mother worked as a sex worker, and one of her clients was actually Alan's father, who later ran away. Because of the absence of a father, Alan grew up without proper guidance or a sense of safety. He often saw his mother with different men at home, which deeply affected his mind and his way of thinking. From there, something dark began to grow inside him, something that would later turn him into a monster. People who knew Alan had mixed opinions about him. Some said he was bright and intelligent, capable of becoming an artist. Others believed he was a violent, unstable boy who could pick a fight with anyone. Alan liked to control people. His mental state kept worsening. He even started secretly watching his sister change clothes in their shared room. His teachers described him as angry and easily distracted. He frequently got into fights with other students just to show dominance. Then something happened that left a permanent scar on Alan's mind. His older brother was killed near a bridge while returning home. During the funeral, Alan's mother said something that shattered him completely. "I wish it was you who had died instead." Those words pierced his heart like an arrow and left a wound that never healed. From that day on, he carried deep hatred inside him, convinced that the world had only given him pain, and he would return that pain to the world. As he grew older, people started seeing him as a thief and a criminal who targeted weaker victims. He began going to the gym to build his body, wanting people to see him as powerful and fear him. Soon he became so dangerous that he would roam the streets shirtless, and people were too scared to even make eye contact with him. Psychologists later said that Alan's body language showed he was trying to take revenge for his humiliation. He wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't weak or useless, the way his mother saw him. He started breaking into people's houses at night when they were asleep, stealing small things not for money but to make people feel his presence. Slowly, he transformed into someone who would soon terrorize the entire Miramichi region. By the time he turned 30, Alan was already well known to the police. But neither the police nor the people around him had any idea what he was truly capable of. His journey, which started with petty thefts, was about to take a deadly turn, and death was about to knock on several doors. On the evening of June 21, 1986, Alan crossed a line from which there was no return. In the city lived an elderly couple, John and Mary, who ran a small convenience store. They were known for their kindness and friendly nature. The couple trusted people easily, but that night, their trust was about to be shattered forever. As they turned off the lights and were closing their store, Alan entered with 2 of his accomplices, Todd and Scott. Alan initially just wanted to finish the job quickly and leave, but when he came face to face with the old couple, Everything changed. The moment Alan and his partner saw them, they unleashed a level of brutality that even shocked the police. This was the night when the devil of Miramichi truly revealed himself. The owner John was beaten so badly that he could not even stand, and Mary was dragged and killed brutally, and was also sexually assaulted. With this cruelty, Alan wanted to send everyone a single message, that their trust in goodness should be broken, and that people only pretend to be good. After committing this crime, Alan and his accomplices disappeared into the darkness, and John died at the scene. Mary, though covered in blood, was still breathing, crawling slowly. She somehow reached a telephone and called the police. As soon as the police received the news, they rushed to the scene, and when they entered the store they saw a scene of devastation that chilled them to the bone. At that moment an officer noticed Mary, and her presence was a huge piece of evidence for the police, because she became the eyewitness to the entire incident. Relying on Mary's testimony, the police began their investigation, and within just a few days the three suspects were in custody. During strict questioning, Todd confessed to the murders and to the involvement of the three in the crime, and the weapon used in the murder was also recovered. With this evidence and Mary's testimony, it was proven that Alan was the mastermind behind the whole incident, and that it happened at his command. In court, Mary described how brutally her husband John had been beaten and how, even as he was dying, he tried to protect her. After hearing all the evidence and testimonies, the judge sentenced Alan to life imprisonment. But there was neither remorse nor concern on his face. For most people, life ends with a life sentence. But for Alan it was a new beginning. And from here the story took an even more dangerous turn. After he went to prison, everyone assumed the other inmates would be threatened by him. Surprisingly, inside the prison he became a completely different person. He began to follow every rule and never troubled a guard or another prison. But behind this truth, he was planning something very dangerous. He started watching the guards closely, noting their schedules, when duty changed, and how the entire prison system operated. He wanted to find any possible way to escape, and in May 1989 he finally got his chance. He had been in that prison for the previous 3 years, constantly planning and rehearsing so that he could run away when the right time came. The prison where Alan was held was the Atlantic Institution at Renews, and its walls were so high that escaping seemed impossible. Yet the prison could not stop Alan. Starting his plan, Alan began to complain to the guards that he had an ear infection and severe pain. He started pretending to be a sick inmate whose health often worsened, and because of this the prison medical staff prepared to send him to Dumont Regional Hospital for treatment. On the morning of May 3, 2 guards shackled his legs and put him into the prison van. The guards had no idea that this was the moment Alan had been eagerly waiting for. Alan had hidden a sharp antenna in his body, which he had broken off from the cell television, and he had concealed it so well that no one noticed. After arriving at the hospital, he told the guards he wanted to use the washroom, and they allowed him to go. Inside the washroom, he first took out the hidden antenna, and began to remove his handcuffs and shackles. In just a few seconds he freed himself and was fully ready to carry out his plan. When someone knocked on the door and a guard opened it, Alan suddenly leapt out and ran. The guards chased him, and in the chaos he grabbed a fire extinguisher and struck both guards in the face. Hospital staff also chased him, but he ran down the hospital corridor, out through a gate and vanished into the parking lot. In that parking lot a woman named Peggy Olive had just gotten out of her car. She was a patient who had just arrived. Alan opened her car door, forced her into the driver's seat, and told her she was accused of murder and to sit quietly. Peggy later told the police that Alan had pressed the antenna against her neck and told her to drive quietly. She thought she was going to die. But after they had driven a short distance, Alan's mood suddenly changed. He began to speak kindly to Peggy, and told her he would not harm her or her car. After driving a bit further, he let her out. It was strange that an escaped murderer behaved so politely, but that too was part of his planning. At any rate, he left the car in a deserted place, and disappeared into the crowd. He had no money, no food, and no plan, but one thought kept turning in his mind: he wanted to return home. News of Alan's escape reached every police station, and the largest manhunt in Brunswick's history began. By nightfall every road out of town was blocked, but by then it was too late. He had already left for Miramichi. The months that followed would be a catastrophe for the people of Miramichi, and Alan decided he would make sure they never forgot his name. After escaping from prison, Most people thought he would run far away. No one imagined he would return to Miramichi, the place where he had been captured. By May 1989, reports spread throughout Miramichi that someone was entering houses at night, and strange noises were coming from the nearby woods. On the night of May 29, a terrible fire broke out in a house where a 75-year-old woman named Annie lived, and she was burned to death. Neighbors ran to help when they saw the fire, but it was too late. The flames had taken over the house. Annie's sister Nina somehow escaped, but her body was badly burned and she was admitted to the hospital in critical condition. Before losing consciousness, Nina said 5 words that changed everything. She said someone had tied her to the bed. The police soon realized that this was not an accident, but an attack in which a man had assaulted both women and demanded money. When they refused, he attacked. Annie had been savagely beaten, sexually assaulted, strangled, and then the house was set on fire. The crime scene was so horrific, it horrified the police, and in her statement Nina said the attacker wore a metal chain around his waist, like the ones prisoners wear. This was a major lead for the police, and they quickly understood that the escaped prisoner Alan had returned to Miramichi. Overnight Miramichi changed. Doors that were once never locked were now all shut, and people began sleeping with guns beside their beds. Alan's terror became so great that parents stopped their children from going outside to play, and the police began patrolling all night. But Alan was always one step ahead of the police. He knew every inch of the woods, and also knew the hiding places in town, which is why no one could catch him. He would silently emerge in the darkness at night and kill people, and some even claimed they had seen him, but no one had solid proof. On the night of October 13, 1989, Alan set fire to another house, where Linda and Donna Downey lived together as sisters. When the police arrived, they found the house engulfed in flames, and both sisters dead. Both had been brutally beaten, sexually assaulted, and then strangled. Investigating officers said the attack was carried out with planning, and the forensic team recovered some DNA at the crime scene. Finally, the fear came true. The DNA samples matched Alan's, which caused panic across Miramichi. The news spread like wildfire, and people began telling different stories. Some said they had seen Alan walking near the river at night. Others said they heard his voice outside their window. Shopkeepers began closing earlier, and by nightfall the streets were deserted. Scared people called the police every day, and Alan was no longer just an escaped convict. He had become a new name for fear in Miramichi. On the night of November 16, 1989, Alan did something no one could have imagined, and Miramichi's last hope was shattered when he targeted Father James Smith of the church. Father Smith did not come to morning prayers, so some people went to check on him that night and were stunned by what they saw. They found Father Smith's dead body in his home, his throat slit, his chest had been opened and his jaw broke. The attack was carried out with extreme cruelty and savagery, and it was an assault not only on the priest, but on the faith of the entire Catholic community. Terrified, the people of Miramichi began sleeping in shifts, and some even left the town. The police said it was as if he were trying to catch a shadow, and Alan was silently challenging them every time. For almost 7 months, he kept the entire city of Miramichi under his control through fear. He would commit his crimes, and then quietly disappear. They say that every criminal eventually gets tired of his own evil deeds, and makes a mistake, and Alan was about to make one too. By November, more than 10 people had already been killed in Miramichi, and the police still had no clue where Alan was hiding. Although they announced a reward of $500, even after getting several tips from people, they couldn't reach Alan. On the night of November 23, 1989, Alan struck again. But this time the attack was meant to help him escape. He hijacked a taxi at gunpoint and told the driver, Grosh, to take him to Moncton, another city in Brunswick. While driving, Grosh lost control and the taxi crashed. After the crash, Alan stopped another car by waving his hand. The car was being driven by a woman named Michelle Merck, a constable who was returning home after finishing her duty. Alan took both Grosh and Michelle hostage and ordered Michelle to keep driving quietly. After a while, Michelle stopped at a gas station to refuel. There, both Grosh and Michelle managed to escape smartly and raised the alarm. Seeing this, Alan panicked and ran away. But soon after, he hijacked a transport truck and told the driver, Brian, to take him to Moncton. By now, Michelle had already informed her department, the RCMP, about the situation. The RCMP quickly set up roadblocks everywhere. On the morning of November 24, the police finally spotted the truck Alan was in. When Alan realized that he was completely surrounded, he quietly surrendered. At last he was back in police custody, and the biggest manhunt in Brunswick's history finally ended. During his first sentence, Alan might have been eligible for parole, but since he had escaped from prison, now it was certain that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The news of his capture spread rapidly throughout Miramichi. People finally breathed a sigh of relief, and the entire city celebrated as if Christmas had come early. After his arrest, Alan was sent to a high-security prison this time. The man who had stolen Miramichi's peace was finally caught. Some people were still so terrified that they couldn't believe he was truly captured. They feared he might return again. A few days later, Alan was transferred to the downtown jail, where he stayed during his trial. In August 1990, he was given an additional 9 years for escaping from prison. At that time, DNA profiling tests were new, so the reports took a long time to arrive. In fact, Canada used DNA profiling for the very first time, especially in this case. Eventually, Alan's DNA samples, collected from burned clothes, victims' fingernails, and charred wood, all matched perfectly. The prosecutor told the court that Alan was a devil and deserved the death penalty. Among all the victims, only Nina Flames had survived. She told the judge every detail of that horrible night when Alan attacked her. In her testimony, Nina said that Alan tied her hands and legs, sexually assaulted her, and then beat her brutally. When she thought she was about to die, Alan looted the house, set it on fire and left. Hearing her statement, the entire courtroom fell silent. Alan sat quietly, listening to everything without any sign of guilt or remorse on his face. After reviewing all the evidence and testimonies, on November 3, 1991, Alan was found guilty of 4 murders and several robberies. This time the judge again sentenced him to life imprisonment, but now he would never be eligible for parole. DNA profiling played a major role in solving this case and sending this monster behind bars. The prison where Alan was kept was later shut down and turned into a science museum. After it closed, Alan was transferred to Canada's highest security supermax prison, from where escape was impossible. He remained there until 2015, after which he was moved to Edmonton Institution, a prison meant for the most dangerous criminal. After spending 30 years in prison, in August 2020 Alan applied for parole. When the news spread through Brunswick and Miramichi, fear returned once again. However, on January 13, 2021, his parole was reviewed, and after speaking with the people of Miramichi and the victims' families, it was rejected. The court stated that Alan was still a serious threat and had shown no sign of remorse for his crime. Over the years, the lives of Miramichi's people have returned to normal, but those 7 months of terror are still fresh in the minds of the older residents. Though the victims finally got justice, whenever their families remember those tragic events, they still see the burning houses and the face of a terrifying serial killer. This was the story of a man whose childhood was stolen, whose mother was a sex worker, and who was shaped by poverty and rejection. These harsh circumstances turned him into a killing machine. He wasn't born a devil, it was his life and the cruel world that made him one. And many innocent people had to pay for it with their lives. How did you find this story? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.